Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Aces High here, and today I'm bringing you guys day number two, video number two of my 7 day straight most interesting, kind of best, worst leaders in the world. I don't even know how to classify it. All I know is at the end of the week, after showing you guys 7 different videos of 7 different historical leaders, we're going to take a vote and we're going to see who you guys think is the, let's call it, most interesting leader. Whether that means that they were the best, they were the worst, they had the most history, or they just did some really weird stuff. I'm going to leave that up to you guys, kind of open ended. But I'm really excited about it. So today we're actually going to be looking at a infographics show video called that's all about Ivan the Terrible. I'll throw the link down in the description, as well as I have a link to my first video if you missed it. It was on Julius Caesar. So I just figured this is a natural change from Julius Caesar. Everybody loved Caesar, man, you know? I mean, most people. He was a great leader, military, government, real people person, you know? People in his empire really loved him. Well, now we're going to take a look at somebody that people did not like. Anyway, before we get started, if you guys haven't hit that sub button, go ahead and smack that sub button and make sure you ring the bell because I still got 5 more days of these videos on leaders and I don't want you guys to miss a single one. Alright, you guys, let's get started.
It's a dark, stormy night in 16th century Muscovy, the nation that would one day become modern Russia. Right now, though, the nation that would one day arise to become a second superpower is nothing more than a small landlocked kingdom, stuck between fierce adversaries on all borders. The problems of his nation weigh heavy on the mind of Grand Prince Vasily III, who can't help but shudder in his furs against the chill of an unexpectedly cold summer storm that's enveloped his land. Vasily III's hold on his throne is tenuous at best. His one and only wife had failed to provide an heir, ultimately proving to be infertile. Against the wishes of every religious figure in Muscovy, Vasily divorced his wife and married a much younger woman, Yelena Glinskaya. 9 months ago, she had conceived, and tonight, she wails in agony of childbirth. As the raging storm's gale rises to match the pained screams of his wife in labor, Vasily can't help but shudder once more as he recalls the curse laid on him by a priest over a year ago. Muscovy was an Orthodox Christian nation, surrounded by Catholics on one side and heathen Muslims on the other. In the eyes of the clergy, a single bright light in the darkness of pagan and false beliefs. Vasily III's divorce of his wife threatened to incur the wrath of God himself against the nation of Muscovy, and the holy man had warned the prince that out of this evil deed an evil child will be born. History would prove the priest's prophecy all too correct.
You know, did they really give him that warning? Or is it just that the child ended up being so terrible that these stories started forming, you know, down the road? That sounds a lot more interesting because if you're telling this story to people, you know, 100 years later, or 50 years later, you're going to include little things like, yeah, the priest, it was a horrible deed he did, so the priest warned him, only evil can come, things like that. But yeah, I don't know if I believe that much. Maybe it happened. I mean, I don't know.
Ivan the Terrible, or Ivan Vasilievich, was born on August 25, 1530, and almost from the moment of his birth, his life was destined to not be a happy one. 3 years after his birth, his father died of infection. This was, after all, the 16th century, and medical technology had barely advanced past the stage of rubbing feces into open wounds. To make matters worse, Muscovy itself was a significantly backwards land. While Europe was in full-on Renaissance mode, Muscovy was caught in the vice-like grip of the Dark Ages. This would be a problem that plagued the Russian state until the 20th century, as it would fight over and over again to rise above its status as Europe's backwater. Shortly after the death of his father, Ivan was proclaimed Grand Prince, though as we'll soon see, this title meant very little in Muscovy royal court. His mother took control of the throne on his behalf and acted as regent, until 6 years later when she died suddenly and mysteriously. Even though people suddenly dying was pretty much just a regular Sunday afternoon in 16th century Muscovy, the death of Ivan's mother was a little too sudden and convenient for the elite boyar, a ruling class of wealthy merchants and noblemen who weren't keen on taking orders from anyone they hadn't personally installed on the throne. Ivan and his younger brother were raised by different boyar families who continued their power struggles as they named themselves regents to the throne. In effect, the young Ivan, future ruler of Muscovy, was nothing more than a pawn caught up in the boyars' chess game, and the center of the intense tug-of-war between powerful families. Some accounts state that the boys were treated poorly, dressed in rags and forced to beg for food, even while being kept in a royal palace. Whatever the truth, the Boyars' treatment of Ivan would add to a growing resentment and paranoia concerning the Boyars, which would one day end in a lot of blood spilled. A close friend to the teenage
For those of you guys that know a little bit about Ivan the Terrible, was his childhood really that bad? I mean, it seems strange that the child of a ruler and the future ruler of a nation would be treated so bad. It just kind of sounds like made up stories again, but maybe you guys can kind of confirm this.
Ivan, however, came in the form of a priest named Macarius, who would eventually be named into a saint by the Eastern Orthodox Church. Macarius stressed on Ivan his belief in Christianity, and those beliefs would shape the young Ivan. Sadly, Ivan pretty much ignored all the lessons of Christianity about charity, compassion, humility, and respect, and instead got stuck with Macarius' idea to turn Moscovia into the new Byzantine Empire by making it the center of Orthodox Christianity. Moscow, the default capital, would even come to be known as the Third Rome. Under Macarius' tutelage, Ivan was crowned on the 16th of January 1547 at the age of 16. The Boyars
Sorry to pause it again, but if anybody knows, let me know in the comments. What was the second Rome? I'd really like to know.
had wanted Ivan to be crowned as Grand Prince, but Ivan refused the Boyars and instead, under Macarius' suggestion, crowned himself as Tsar, the Russian equivalent of Caesar. The message was clear. Ivan wasn't taking anyone's crap anymore, especially not the Boyars. In one brilliant move, Macarius had joined Ivan's political powers with those of the church, granting him religious authority over Muscovy as well. Ivan was now well and firmly out of the grasp of the Boyars, and to defy him meant to defy the will of God himself. Because you know, history is pretty stupid sometimes. Shortly after his coronation, Ivan began to build on his reputation in a fierce manner. A great fire swept across Moscow, destroying much of the city which had been built of wood. In the outrage following the fire, mobs of people took to the streets, and the blame was placed on relatives of Ivan, with some claiming that witchcraft had been used to start the fire. It never once occurred to a single Moscow citizen that a regular fire would do a pretty good job of burning down an all-wood city, and the witchcraft thing kinda stuck. In the ensuing riot, several of Ivan's extended family members were killed. Upon hearing of their murders, Ivan quickly laid the blame for the plot on several powerful political enemies, whom he had summarily executed. Ivan had turned a disaster into a political advantage, and slowly the terror that ruled Muscovy was becoming apparent. Ivan soon took to attempting to modernize the backwards country he was in charge of. He revised the law to severely limit the power of the boyars. Where once a boyar could freely do as he or she wished with the common folk, now boyars could be held accountable for murder, rape, robbery, or any other common crime. Far from enacting reforms out of a sense of justice, though, Ivan was merely working to further weaken the boyars he distrusted so much. In one incident where a crowd of citizens showed up demanding justice against a member of the boyar, he had 20 of them executed. It was
Wow, that's it's an interesting way to do it. You know, to get what you want done. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways, but I guess that's kind of his way of ruling.
It was at this time that Ivan, still under the influence of Orthodox Christianity, though literally none of its values, built the St. Basil's Cathedral. Always working to force Muscovy out of its backwards roots and into the modern era, Ivan built the cathedral as a monument to Muscovite culture, and it remains standing to this day. Ivan also turned his eyes east, raising a standing army and going to war against the Tartars, which had invaded his lands with impunity for decades. In a stunning victory where he hired Dutch engineers to blow up the walls of a major Tartar fortress, Ivan secured his eastern borders from further incursions. Things quickly took a turn for the worse, though. Consecutive droughts and famines rocked the land, and laws were drafted to prevent peasants from leaving their lands in search of better land to farm and settle. These laws would eventually lead to the creation of the Russian serf class. Military disaster also visited Ivan's reign.
So these laws were there to keep them in place, but way back when, before, you know, I know it eventually led to the serf class, but beforehand, when it first started, did they actually have guards there like that picture showed, kind of watching over them, or did they just say this is a law punishable by death or something like that? Let me know.
A landlocked nation with no access to the open ocean, Ivan tried unsuccessfully to invade lands to the west, what would today be modern Latvia and Estonia. Under blockade by other European nations, Muscovy desperately needed access to the open ocean if it was going to prosper financially. Despite some initial success, Ivan's forces met with disaster after disaster. To make matters worse, one of Ivan's closest advisors, Prince Andrei Kurbsky, defected to the Lithuanians he was fighting and returned to the region of Vielkie Luki at the head of a Lithuanian army, devastating it. This would further cement Ivan's mistrust and hatred for the nobility. In 1564, Ivan left Moscow and sent a letter informing his former court that he was abdicating his throne.
I'm going to pause that just so you guys can read it. My dearest subjects, I'm sorry to be breaking up with you like this. It's not me, it's you. To be more specific, it's the aristocrats and clergymen. That's pretty funny.
In the letter, Ivan stated that the continued crimes of the aristocracy and clergy against his throne and the nation itself made it impossible for him to rule. Muscovite citizens grew angry with the boyars, and they were forced to ask Ivan to return to the throne. Ivan agreed, but only if he was given absolute power with no checks or balances. Reluctantly, the boyars agreed. This would prove to be a major mistake. Upon returning to the capital, Ivan immediately created the Oprichnina, a territory within the borders of Muscovy where Ivan had complete and total power. The boyars would rule the rest of the land, the Zemshchina. To enforce his will and ferret out political opponents, Ivan created the first of Russia's famous secret police, the Oprechnikia. Headed by Malyuta Skuratov, an extreme sadist, the Oprechnikia launched a wave of terror and violence against the population and the boyars both.
Oprechnia. I wonder if that came kind of from the same roots as the word oppress, because secret police. It just kind of seems like oppressing to me. I guess suppressing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just talking out of my butt. Anyway, I'll get back to it.
Always wishing to keep the boyars under his thumb and in fear of him, Ivan allowed Skuratov to do as he pleased, and the latter was fond of occasionally sending the Oprechnikia to round up married women of Moscow so they could all be raped. This not only kept the boyars in terror, but with many unwanted pregnancies, which would devastate many powerful aristocratic bloodlines. With the aid of the Oprechnikia, Ivan arrested, tortured, and exiled many boyars he accused of conspiracy against the crown, often on the most flimsy of charges. In 1566, Ivan expanded the borders of the Oprichnina, the territory he ruled alone, and included 8 other districts. Out of 12,000 nobles in those territories, 570 became Oprechnikia, while the rest fled or were expelled. As Ivan's secret police, the Oprechnikia owed their allegiance only to him, and were rewarded handsomely for their service. Where the treatment of peasants by the boyars had been reined in by Ivan's reforms years ago, the Oprechnikia were given complete and absolute immunity from prosecution. They could do as they wished in large estates given to them by Ivan, and they often did, killing, robbing, or raping as they pleased. This led to a mass exodus of peasants from the land, which inevitably caused a massive collapse of farming in Muscovy. Grain scarcity would lead to a massive hike in prices, and the Muscovite economy all but collapsed. Plague and famine soon hit Muscovy, and the ongoing Livonian War against the Western European powers only served to further take a toll on the nation. Ivan's paranoia escalated to truly insane heights, and he grew fearful that the city of Novgorod was planning to defect to Lithuania. While historians believe that this was completely false, Ivan, ever fearful and paranoid, ordered a raid of the city by the Oprechnikia. Once more, they were given free rein, and Ivan's secret police pillaged Novgorod and every surrounding village. Ancient casualty figures number
60,000 victims? That number cannot be right. Oh my god, that's incredible. Jesus. Anytime that the term secret police or something like that comes up, I don't feel good about it. I don't think there's a single time in history that just sounds good, Jesus Christ, man.
Number the victims at 60,000, but this is likely extremely exaggerated. What is known, though, is that Ivan routinely ordered the execution of Novgorod citizens, tying men, women, and children to sleighs and running them into the freezing Volkhov River. Many more were tortured, and the archbishop was arrested and then set loose in the woods to be hunted and killed like an animal by Ivan's secret police. Ivan's black legacy of torture, rape, and murder would spread across Muscovy, While his moniker the Terrible was a mistranslation of a Russian honorific, Ivan nevertheless lived up to his mistranslated title and remains one of the most reviled men in history. Ivan would go on to die while playing chess in 1584, and while he was a brutal dictator, his sheer determination and willpower would serve to unify Muscovy and set it on the path to become modern Russia. Now that you've learned all about...
Okay. Yeah, let's have a chat about that, you guys. Ivan the Terrible. So, I mean, first off, that is such a change from the video I posted yesterday about Julius Caesar. I mean, it's like night and day. Hell, I mean, it's kind of like Julius Caesar, Ivan the Terrible. I have a challenge for you. I don't know too much about him, but if you guys found something that he did that's really good other than just uniting the country, let me know in the comments, because I would really love to know. And, of course, keep in mind, if you haven't watched the first video, go back and watch that. And I have 5 more coming, and then we're going to go ahead and vote on it at the end of the week. So we're going to try to get that most interesting leader out there. I'm really excited for this, but that's all I got for you guys, other than this guy just sucked, you know? Till next time, this is Ace Asai. Love y'all, and I'm out.